we understand construction. I think how we can help is identifying that risk up front and enabling the transparency that our tools bring to the table.
Hello, project people. Welcome back to a brand new episode of a 2023 Project Chatter podcast. I can't believe we're here. It's always good to have you with us. And we have a full house again. Dale, how are you, sir? What's happening?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's amazing. It's been a really, really busy start to the year. I think, specifically here in the UK, project-wise, it's full steam ahead. It's what Christmas, But yeah, good to be back. Second episode of 2023. It's good to have Martin back on his first episode of the year.
I know. Yeah. Martin, where have you been? What's happening?
I had the dreaded COVID last time. Sorry to miss it. It was a really good episode. Suzanne was really interesting.
Very good. Well, welcome back, mate. I'm glad you recovered. And I'll introduce our guests one at a time because I'll screw it up otherwise. Jeff Quantrill, or Quantrill, should I say? How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Val. Good.
Yeah, good to hear you. And Jordan Gannon, how are you?
I'm doing well. Just sitting in a 67th floor in a hotel in Dubai.
Yeah, I feel like we should give you a disclaimer before we even get into it. So it is midnight or something over there. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. 12:13.
All right. So we'll be gentle on Jordan. So Jeff, you get the heavy questions. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. Well, while Jordan's living the dream, sat there in the hotel with his feet up and what have you.
We'll tease.
Yeah, he looks super relaxed. Yeah. Well, look, Jets, one of the things we love to do is just find a little bit more about why people do what they do. And I think that helps the listeners just get a bit of context, absolutely why you're here, what you're doing. Jeff, projects are always interesting. And most of the people that we have on the podcast have some conversation about how they fell into projects. They didn't necessarily set out from uni to say, well, I'm going to be a project manager or whatever it is. Something happens in their lives and they end up in this wonderful community. How did you end up here, Jeff? Where did you come from?
Yeah, there's a very long story, but in very short terms, in my early 30s, I changed career from a sales-based career to IT tech, and I was very fortunate in that I managed to get a role with IBM, and it was a support role, and I ended up supporting a particular project for one of IBM's clients, where, as tends to happen, you naturally tend to fall into doing stuff because it needs to be done. And the person I was working with said, have you ever thought about project management? I was like, well, no, not really. I'm a techie. And they said, well, you've looks like you've got a bit of a knack for it. So I was really fortunate that IBM at the time had a proper training program that they did in order to become accredited as a project manager. So I went through that. And then one of the roles that I then did, which I really enjoyed, was that, I think in process. I'm one of those strange people that doesn't actually fear the word process. So I ended up project managing the implementation of complex IT processes. So this is before ITIL and all those things came about, for IBM on behalf of their clients. Did that for quite a number of years and ended up eventually running the department that I'd originally joined sort of 15 years previously. Came to the end of that thing with IBM. There were a lot of changes going on, and I had the opportunity to change again. So out of sales, I'd gone into IT. Out of IT, I got the opportunity to join Arcadis, and this was on their sort of project controls, client-facing IT, as it was called. So I did that, and really enjoyed it. Partly because of the process side of things. The first thing I saw was that, this was a project controls was theoretically very heavily process bound, but then I arrived on site and it amazed me just how much scope there was in this industry to digitally bring things forward. I mean, this is 2015. And I used to joke that, it was one of the first times I'd ever come across people who would quite happily, if you told them you were going to take their system away from them, I'd always been in an industry where it was like, oh my God, the world will end. I joined sort of this side of the business, and it was like, no problem, we'll just go back to pen and paper. It was completely new to me, this idea that people didn't actually depend on IT for their work. So got into it, did some things in the UK, then had the opportunity to go out to the Middle East, where I worked on some of the giga-projects out there, and doing some process methodology stuff. Finished there, and InEight came along and said, how'd you like to come along and help us grow in EMEA, which is why I'm here.
Awesome. That is great. And Jordan, what about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna take kind of a far-fetched approach and say, rewind a little bit to my childhood just for a second. You're gonna be like, what is this guy talking about? This guy's crazy. But no, I think it's really important to the way I came, who I am, and the way I think, the way I am. It goes all the way back to I grew up on land in the woods, not like some farm boy way out. We were near a city, but I used to build tree houses, and I literally used to sit there and imagine and look and was like, I'm going to network this, and I'm going to put a little basketball to shoot on the tree over there, and it's going to be a multi-level fort. And I used to turn my ATV four-wheeler lights on to like shine up there and build the tree. Well, I really feel like that started my creativity in my mind and my innovation and my thought, which we're going to fast forward all the way to why I feel I have dissect processes can evolve really well. But got into the construction industry, started with Kiewit, actually InEight's parent company, who we work with, and was in the industrial sector. Started as a field engineer, was in the field. They brought me back to estimation for a little while, and I was like, man, this is boring. Like, get me out of the office. So got into turnover completions management, which was very, you get to see on the job site, you walk down all the entire job site, all the disciplines. You're walking down piping systems and mechanical systems and electrical systems. So talking construction, field-based experience, but a lot of time like in the field with people. Well, very quickly that resulted in the need. It was part of our quality management program. I worked for our quality director for a company called TIC, which was the division of Kiewit. And quality process became part of my niche. And quality process, obviously, to manage processes involves technology. So that slowly kind of started my shift into process improvement, technology advancement. I quickly got bored at that company, working in the construction industry itself. After about 6 years, I standardized some processes globally for quality, safety, environmental, things like that. Built a project management platform, even on a collaborative workspace before. And I said, you know what, I need to go into consulting or do something, because my brain's so crazy and thinking different ways. I can't be focused on one project. I need to talk to different people. I need to be in different places. I need to be analyzing different processes. So drove me into two different roles for two construction companies. We're still work in-house for a construction company, but they call like a business excellence manager, operation excellence manager. Actually strategically pitched the role where they created the role at the company, but it was really more to really understand business process improvement for the organizations, and then technology follow-ons behind it to manage that. And then started studying things like Lean Six Sigma and organizational change management. And then COVID hit, which changed the world for a lot of people, and decided to move south, and then started with InEight, and wasn't there 6 months, also getting very bored, just demoing basic stuff. Well, they asked me to come join a global team and start a team. So I was like, perfect, that's right up my alley. Had sold a house, broke up with a girl, and I was like, send me there. So joined the EMEA team, got to be a part of an awesome kind of a startup, but funded by, well backed up company, and be able to build up a region and study the different markets, and all the way down to here we are talking about an NEC process. Like I rewind it all the way back, but the ability to dissect and think and, talk to customers and see their needs for ability to manage a contracting process like NEC. And it just is in my brain. I can just see it. I see how it fits together. I see the tools and everything all together. So, it was a kind of a long-winded answer there, but happy to be here. Passionate about my background related to the topic. So
I love the thoughts too. I think I did something similar. I lived in not super country because, otherwise my jaw would be smaller. But I did have, the opportunity to go out there and just build stuff in the middle of nowhere, and with complete autonomy. And it was always in the treetops, so you had this huge view and perspective. And I think that did have some impact on my life and where I went as well. And it is very interesting how you guys both fell into these roles, and where the wind takes you kind of thing. And now you're here, and we're talking about a very ambiguous title. Can I just say that, gentlemen? I don't know who came up with this. I'm not going to blame anyone, but I think we owe the audience a little bit of a definition. So I'm going to break it down for them. Maximizing efficiency. I mean, that is in its purest form, a little bit of clickbait there, a little bit ambiguous. What does maximizing efficiency really mean from your perspective, gentlemen? Maybe Jeff, you first.
Yeah. So the fact is that one of the things projects aren't short of is data. There is tons of data. But the thing that still persists is the amount of rework that takes place on what is fundamentally the same piece of information. So the number of times people have to perform additional steps simply to get a piece of data and use it along a process. It's the number of retypings, or even just cut and paste. It sounds easy. Oh, you just cut and paste it. We used to call it the swivel chair interface from one end to the other. But the fact is that on some of these, especially on some of the larger jobs, you're talking about potentially thousands of times that happens. It's wasted work. So yeah, that's why the maximizing efficiency piece was part of the title.
And Jordan, I guess this is the thing around maybe big projects, the degrading of efficiency as the project scales. Sometimes it's to do with the phase of the project. Sometimes it's to do with the size of the project. Sometimes it's the location, maturity. What does maximizing efficiency mean to you?
For me, you think of efficiency or productivity, just being able to do more with less, right? So there's, related to like the projects, whether, you're having people down to having the right tool, in terms of having the right tool in your hand to actually operate the job. You have the wrong tool, it's going to take you longer. You may mess up, you may have bad quality, have rework where, same thing with the technology aspect, the ability to have the right tool to be more efficient, to operate quicker. The world, it's also funny that you look way back and see the quality and architecture of some of these towns and cities that they've built up. And today things have become mass building and quick and efficient and productive, right? But it's a different world today. And in order to stay competitive in a marketplace, you have to keep up the environment and be efficient with your people, with your tools, with your technology, everything right there. So that's really, really more the message for me, is to do more with less. And for us, even a region as a startup, have to come over here and kick off with very little people and maximize efficiency and maximize gains from the little you have. So
yeah, that's great. I mean, I did a little bit of lean construction, and I find it bizarre that, and I'm not sure if the Australian market is so different from the rest of the world. I'd love to get your inputs, and I'll pass off to Dale in a second, but we don't talk about lean construction that much. And it shocks me because I think there's always a bit of room for everyone, right? No one's running a perfect process. It's not the case of, you start a project, even with a good set of software principles, frameworks, methodologies, there's always an ability to be more efficient. And so things like the excellence role that you're talking about, Jordan, we don't hear about that. And I'm wondering if we're missing out down south. Dale, maybe is this happening in the UK? Do you have the same kind of methods?
I think we certainly talk a lot about it. I think there's an endeavor on UK projects to be more efficient. There's clearly blockers, and I think that's a global problem rather than a UK specific problem. And they range from everything process wise through to politics. So we won't go down to that too much, but certainly there's a lot of talk around it, and there is some action, to be fair, but I don't think we've fully utilized streamlining and all the different various types of methodologies to maximize efficiency to the maximum. But talking about maximizing efficiency, and Jordan, you mentioned, doing more with less. I mean, you've had very little sleep on the airplane. You've been up. It's midnight there. So you're certainly maximizing your efficiency on this podcast as a real life example. So thank you for doing that. But if we rewind a little bit and just give a bit of a context to this and where it follows on from, back in season 2, Val and Martin, episode 31, when we had Glenn Hyde on talking about NEC contracts, Val, you specifically asked Glenn, when are software companies and organizations going to start linking contracts to NEC commercial, to make things better? And that leads us to the second half of this title, NEC cross-functional processes. Now, a little bit less ambiguous, perhaps, because it talks about NEC, but cross-functional, Jeff. So what is NEC cross-functional processes?
So the fact is that the NEC process, and in particular the two that we chose to focus on when we were looking at this, and the two that are key. I mean, if you talk to people that are in the NEC organization, they will talk especially about the early warning process as being, it's the crown jewel of the NEC contract is the early warning process. And the fact is that typically that's a process that exists at the moment, or in a lot of places, as a document. It's not a lived process, and people will have it, but at the end of the day, when they are trying to operate that process, they will historically do it via a combination of completely different media. So they will have their document management system, for example, that will operate their original notice or their request for information or anything like that. But then they'll talk about, well, what's the impact on our cost? And somebody will go to a separate system and they will do some estimation, and they'll come back. And quite often you'll have both the client and the supplier both doing that, each in their own systems. And similarly for schedule, the client will then go to their planners and say, what would the likely impact of this be? And the supplier will do the same with his planners, and they'll come back. And the fact is that all these different pieces of information historically have sat in siloed workplaces, or workbench tools, as I used to refer to them. By actually taking a system like InEight, where the integrations between those different capabilities are available to you, it means that all of a sudden what was historically siloed data becomes collaborative data, becomes reusable data. And just picking up the point about maximizing efficiency, one of the things that struck me was there is this big push, certainly in the UK, for collaboration and for sharing of data. And I heard a conversation or a call last week about the Highways Agency and the way in which they're reusing data. And the fact is that when you get that reuse of data, when you get that collaboration, you can actually start to monitor operations better across multiple projects, multiple instances. And that actually brings you then to a set of processes that exist in the IT world, but don't really exist in the construction world, which is this notion of continual service improvement. This idea that the more you do something, the more you learn about something, the more you can actually focus on those areas, like in Lean, of saying, why are we doing that? Could we do it better? Is there a way of getting more out of this? And then that sort of continual service feedback loop. But to do that, you have to have that end-to-end view of the data, and that's not possible unless that data is integrated across the piece.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. Lots of questions come up there. And if I switch to you, Jordan, from, I guess, the tech aspect, are we talking about digitalizing commercial management?
Tech aspect, you hit my jet lag here for a minute. What? What do you mean?
Are we talking about the process of managing commercial contracts and taking that full on into the digital world where, there's no more paper pushing, there's no more emails, all the data is consolidated. So you have your cost schedule, impacts, your what if analysis, your risk, your baselining, if you got earned value linked to your early warnings and your change controls. Is that now, are we talking about you digitalize all of that and then all of a sudden becomes sort of you press one button, you realize what the impacts are and everything?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like, boom, wow, I think I need to put my thinking hat on here to think about that, man. It's like,
Now we're talking.
yeah, it's crazy. We go from like people managing all these things all over in emails and spreadsheets and all over the place. It's like, boom, can you really connect all this stuff together? Like, is this real? No, no, for sure. No, it's it kind of blew my mind when we started to learn and study these processes, like and understand what current customers are, how they were managing these things. And it almost blows your mind. Like, they have an Excel spreadsheet for establishing a Word document for establishing the contract that they send to an email, and then they're managing changes that they're estimating in Excel and sending it over. And to see from how the world has started to evolve from that aspect to really more of a digitizing all those processes into technology and leveraging, not even only managing in platforms, but connecting them. And as kind of mentioned to Jeff's of the learning into AI and analyzing AI and risk analysis to really, maximize efficiency and machine learning, even past the humans. We're talking about from pen and paper to machines learning. It's like, boom, what's going on here, but no, it's really been interesting for me, even in my career of 10 years, and that this has been going on for way before my era of time, and here of pen and paper through evolution of time, where these processes are really being managed. But it's still a challenge for many people out there that there's so much silo of these managing the risk and the change here and the estimation of the change here and the contract here. And it's like, how do you get all these things together, right? And that's what I think you figured out really well. And the market is going that way, where people are coming up with solutions to really connect the dots there, that, hey, we actually need the data to flow from here to here to here to be efficient and actually truly mitigate risk and add in that collaboration aspect that brings all the stakeholders in the project together to actually resolve problems and mitigate the problems before they, really truly cause cost and schedule impacts.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I'm sure Val and Martin will go into sort of the detail of how the data flows all the way through all those various processes. But before we go there, I want to come back to you, Jeff. You mentioned continual service improvement, and you mentioned collaboration. Could you peel back some of the layers of what you mean by that? And perhaps, do you have any sort of real life examples of this working in progress, not in progress, real life, where it works, and some of the advantages that projects and organizations actually saw?
Yeah, although unfortunately it's not in the construction sector. I mean, the fact is, thanks to my background, I also have a background in something called the ITIL process set. Which people in IT will know, and they'll either love it or hate it. But the fact is, the ITIL process set, and very particularly, version 3, but also version 4, was very heavy on this idea that one of the things you should embed in your delivery of a service is continual service improvement. Always looking for why things have happened, and trying to figure out ways, if something bad's gone, if something's happened, get to the root cause of why it happened, and then try and ensure that you put in place steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. So the fact is it's almost, I mean, it does happen in the project world. It comes actually from aeronautics. This idea that you can't fail. There is no such thing as human error. There has to be a way of ensuring that your process doesn't fail. And if every time something happens that's caused a failure, you analyze it and build and make it better, you actually progress. And the same thing applies in the construction side of things, with things like risks. The fact is that actually, most risks that have happened, I think, on construction have actually probably already happened. There are very few things that will happen on a construction site today that have never, ever, ever happened before. But the fact is, human beings are really bad at thinking about risk. They don't think about it in terms, they overestimate some risks, underestimate others. And the fact is that if it's not happened for a while, people forget about it. The good thing about doing this and having this collaboration, this ability to look over the whole set of projects that organization has, is that AI doesn't forget, doesn't over or underestimate, because it's looking at the real data. And the AI can say to you when you're creating a schedule, you're doing this particular piece of work. Were you aware that every other time you've done this piece of work, this has happened? I wasn't. I need to include a risk for it. I need to include some uncertainty for it. And that actually then builds that continual improvement into the cycle. And it's something that's really important, but unfortunately quite often gets left by the wayside because people are on to the next big thing, the next project and what have you. And it's sometimes quite difficult to take that step back and think on the wider scale about it. And that's why AI and ML, I think, will help immensely in that.
Yeah. Just one more before I bring Machine Gun Martin in. It's interesting you talk about risk there because all sorts of things come up. You're right. I think, generally most people think quite linearly about risk. This happens, therefore that's the impact, and this is what we do to fix it. But we live in a complex world, as you say. But just quickly, you mentioned ITIL. That's ITIL, right? And it stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library. Can you maybe just share a little bit for those that haven't heard of ITIL before, what it means for IT projects and what you've borrowed from that world into the construction world?
So ITIL is and was originally generated as a way of operating IT services. Developed originally in the UK, British government was part of that. And it was a way of reaching a common set of understandings about processes. The reason for that is that, part of continual improvement, but it was about the fact that, as an example, one of the worst things you can do in an IT environment is change something. But like it or not, change is it happens all the time. The IT is always changing, it's always moving forward. So there has to be a way of ensuring that change is controlled. So as an example, there is a very specific set of processes around change that are designed to ensure that you don't mess it up, that you don't have an entire 48-hour outage for a simple change because nobody's looked at it properly. And it is, so there's change, there's what's called incident management, so that ability to just fix a standard, I can't log on, that kind of thing. And a nicer extension of that is something called problem management. And problem management is about something has gone wrong, and generally we want to get to the root cause of it because it was so significant that we need to take steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. And there's lots of other stuff about how you manage IT services, now about your forecast, capacity and what have you. But fundamentally, it is about that running an IT service and making sure that it delivers business as usual, day in, day out, so that, frankly, most of us are, with certainly our interactions with most of the major IT companies, actually probably won't have a major problem on any day of the week because these things have been happening over decades now. So it's about that improvement there.
No, that's really interesting. And I think there's a lot we love exploring sort of other sectors and what we can borrow from them, sort of in the mega project space. Just a quick Wikipedia, we love a bit of a Wikipedia every now and again. It tells us that it's for IT activities such as IT service management, ITSM, and IT asset management that focuses on aligning IT services with the needs of the business. So thank you. Very, very succinctly put there. Machine Gun Martin, what do you have for, go easy on Jordan, right? But go give all the hard ones.
Nah, just go hard, mate.
He's put his thinking cap on, so you can go hard.
Yeah, My internet says it says it's unstable. I was like, is it talking about my brain now right now or what? Like y'all went like, whoa, and I was like, what?
I wanted just noted that Jordan's getting his excuses in early. If he gets a difficult question,
I
it's
saw
just
that.
going to cut out.
Probably not a difficult question, but more using your experience of the technology and on major projects. I think one of the challenges with NEC, and certainly in my experience, is some of the behaviors on usually both sides, both the client and the contractor. Using the example that Jeff just gave around risk and how much you might allow despite what the machine learning tells you that it's happened so many times, how does the technology, I'm kind of talking about behaviors, how can you kind of call out poor behaviors in that, where it might not be in the contractor's best interest to say what the, you know, if the technology says a certain activity takes 30 days, but they want a price for 20 days, how do you get around those poor behaviors, and how can you use the technology to inform decisions where it may not be in the contractor's best interest to admit to showing a longer program, let's say?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we always talk about, and I've certainly talked about many times, no, Jordan has, when we talk to clients about implementing InEight, a lot of our conversation is actually around the fact that implementing the technology is not actually the biggest issue that a client will face. It's the necessary change in business mindset, in the culture to use that new technology and take advantage of it and adopt it. And I think it's a bit wide, it's much wider, but it is that wider issue that we have in the industry, which is that if you are going to move from a system where, or from a regime where contracts are, and I spoke, or I saw a presentation last week from the guy who heads up complex projects at the Highways Agency, and he was talking specifically about the changing cultures that are required to operate a system where, instead of reporting information and then reacting to those reports, you get to a situation where, because the data is timely and it is accurate, you're able to predict what you're going to do and prioritize your resources accordingly. And that cannot happen unless you have that collaborative atmosphere where people are properly sharing the data. So you have to move past a piece where effectively a lot of people will have the mindset of, I cannot give you the raw data because I want to look at it first, and I want to just have a look at the spreadsheet that it's on, and I want to make some changes, which is nice and easy because it's on a spreadsheet, and I'll give you a spreadsheet. And that doesn't work in an environment where you're actually trying to make key business and management decisions on a predictive basis. Because if you can't trust the data, you can't make good decisions. So there is a big piece around, you know, collaboration and making an environment where it is acceptable to tell the truth. And that's a much bigger societal problem than just construction. It's just that construction project management is at the thick end of that being the issue. We've got to get to a point where people feel able to be, honest isn't the right word, but to understand that the data is what the data is, and you have to then use it. And that's one of the things that I said, like the AI doesn't care what the potential thought process is behind, can I share this information? AI just looks at it and says, well, that's the data. Make your decision based on it.
Maybe to add to that a little bit, I was like, it was funny when you were saying be easy on Jordan. I thought you were gearing a question at me, and Jeff started going. I was like, what's happening here? But think about behaviors. So you kept saying behavior, and the data and what's going on. But where does the AI even come from, right? It becomes from the humans' input of it, right? Their behaviors, their input. It's all garbage in, garbage out, right? So the AI does learn from human intelligence. It all comes from humans. Humans don't go away. They feed the data. So as soon as you said behaviors and the data, and you know, how would you disagree with something that's in there? It's like, it's being fed by those people, right? So there's, for example, in InEight's risk tool, for example, there's an area where there's like all these people give feedback, and there's some outlier over here of a person with odd things going on in their mind. They're like shooting in crazy, you know, situations. But truly to get that, the AI to learn from that and to gain from that. And when you do analyze it and you look at it, where does that really come from, right? The behaviors of people, their intelligence, their input throughout a life cycle. And that's really what you gain out of it. It just accumulates people's behaviors and thought processes over a long period of time, over a lot of projects, over a lot going on, right? So that's really the kind of that final output. So when people do see something that seems off to them in a technology or tool that's telling them, hey, this duration is telling you it should be 30 more days, but one of the guys over here is the outlier and was like, I told it 10 days, you know, and that's wrong. But it really does look at, like, you know, more on an average perspective of people's behaviors and activities and what's pumping into the data. But I just think it's a world, just taking it a little bit different direction, that it's gotten so AI and data driven and machine learning and robotics. It's like, how did all that happen? Right. Goes back to the people and their behaviors and how it actually does provide value to us today. It does come from us, but.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's ultimately about using the information that's available based on history. Everyone likes to think that their project is unique and their little bit of work is, you know, it could be some optimism bias in there, but, you know, it's probably happened before, as you said, on construction sites, Jeff. The other thing that kind of popped into my head was around technology and identifying some of the inconsistencies in the scope. So having been on a NEC course recently, I hear it's quite very much in the project manager's interest to really nail the scope and get it right first time, because you can get quite heavily financially punished. Have you got any instances where the technology has identified inconsistencies in scope and between documents? Is there anything is it something that it can potentially do? Probably start with you, Jeff.
I think that the difficulty there will come when you're looking at the scope thing, because fundamentally that is what your business case will be based on. And you'll go through and you will go through those various iterations of the scope. I think the only thing where potentially the wider piece on machine learning and what have you will be better is almost at that very first cut. So at the very first time when you say, I'm going to build one of these, actually having machine learning and AI help to actually say, well, every time you build one of these are all the things that you do. And having that laid out for you without somebody having to reinvent the wheel every time. And having it laid out in a way that says, well, okay, when you do this, you know, when you built it with 10 of these, it took you this long and you did all these things. And when you built 50 of them somewhere else, it took you this long. You now want to build 25 of them, and using a machine to actually go through and say, well, actually, first pass, maybe even second pass, this is what you need to be thinking about. It will at least help that initial framing statement. I don't think we're ever going to get away from the fact that most scope statements are the process of a lengthy period of negotiation, either between the owner, between the engineers, the designers, and the contractors. There will be a lengthy negotiation about what people are going to do, for how much money and how quickly. And that's never going to go away. That eternal triangle will always be with us. But what we can do, hopefully, is make the process of getting to a scope statement quicker and easier.
Mm.
And Jordan, in your experience, have you seen ways in which the technology can help solve or at least mitigate some of the human errors in there? You know, you may have two drawings or that were referring to each other with say different, you know, one might say 10 mil and the other one might say 8 mil, but it's just human error. Have you seen any examples where technology can help to identify those errors? or are you
Yeah,
still
no,
going to be ultimately reliant on humans? Sorry.
Certainly no. I mean, you think about scope changes and design changes as they happen through a project, especially whenever those also occur. So what all is related to 3 components: scope, cost, schedule, right? So when there's an issue with one of them or a lack of something, it affects the other 2, right? So whenever there's realized that there was a scope gap and they implement a new change into the design, and then it's brought down. And then all of a sudden, how many, back in the day, all of a sudden a whole new set of packages are released, of documents are released to the field. And it's like the field engineers on the job, like, oh my God, we just got 300 new drawings, a new drawing pack from the engineers. Engineers very poorly communicated to the field of what the changes were. So before, you had comparative analysis of this drawing versus this drawing, what changed, the ability to extrapolate the quantities out of that there was a quantity growth, and then get that into your budget. And then how does that affect your schedule? How does that affect your cost? Before technology, there was so many missed points there. And I remember as a field engineer sitting in the field, literally just running through drawings. I printed off 11 by 17 drawings and I've got 2 side by side. I'm like, what changed? So you just think of the evolution of technology and the efficiency, going back to efficiency, the gains you got to really dissect what the changes were of that scope change or addition, and the ability of the technology to highlight those changes, quantify those changes in terms of quantity, cost, schedule, and really see how that impacts the schedule is just, I just can't even think, how would we go back to the way we used to be doing it? It would take us years and years and years to build things, and we just don't have that kind of time in life now.
And just to add to that, I think that's one of the areas where actually having that end-to-end collaborative system helps, because it builds on the fact that if you are using one piece of data once, at the point that it's created, that is the data. And if you are managing to control the collaboration, ensure the design processes are correct, and your VDC processes are correct, if everybody's only ever looking at the agreed version, then you're going to avoid so many other issues. Quite often, the issue that you talked about, where you've got potentially 2 different measurements, that will have come because at some point there were 2 different documents and they weren't, joined or collaborated on correctly. So having that ability, having that system that takes it and enforces that degree of rigor and control on change and what have you, is massive. I
guess final note there before I move forward. I'm thinking it's such a 2-dimensional. My brain's a little flat right now, but him mentioning throwing out the VDC, you even think of, oh my gosh, all of a sudden a whole new model comes out. Forget the drawing going way back in the world. Now 3D models are coming back to overlay new models, new clash detection, new issue management, what changed for this revision versus this revision, and to be able to go run, we call them digital transformation operations in our model tool, to go analyze all those things and look at the rules and the metadata and really see what changed in a model, for example. Only takes what could have been 1,000 drawings before. So we just took this and scaled it up to a whole nother level of analyzing drawing by drawing, but into a 3D model, which a whole piping system, for example, could have been, 300 isometric drawings, that you've now done issue management and clash detection and changes of overlaying a new model that you've just federated a new model into another model. So, technology has just added a whole nother layer. And I think it just really gets to the productivity, efficiency, and accuracy of what the human brain really couldn't manage as a person. That technology really takes over and helps projects be the success that they are today.
Yeah. And I was just listening to all of you fine people speak facts. I love it. And I had some queries, because I think one of the challenges we have, if we talk about efficiency first, and then I'll talk about process and workflow. One of the major reasons, I think you brought it up, Jeff, that we have inefficiencies is the way the projects start. One of the biggest leverages we have in projects is how we start the project, because once you get going, it's almost like a snowball effect. And if you are at a momentum and a pace that you cannot control anymore. We understand there is a 2 by 2 month period You've got 2 weeks to update and 2 weeks to report. And that is a terrible way to deliver a project. And usually it is lagging indicators. We somehow, particularly in construction, we struggle. Even with all the tools in the shed, we can have the best tools in the house. It doesn't help us. And if we go specifically around NEC for this purpose, one of the challenges is, as you said, like it's still a paper trail before it gets to project award, right? And arguably then, I think this leans into project controls, Dale, where, you know, what we're meant to do, the basic of a work breakdown instruction is the decomposition of scope, right? That's what they call it. But it isn't, right? It never gets there for whatever reason, right or wrong. But arguably what we want is a decomposition of the contract as well, and how that kind of links into the hierarchy of work packages. Because as a project controls or a PMO team, we do package up work, and arguably we should be packaging up contracts the same. So from my perspective, the difference, and this is where organizational design gets a bit strange, because I think we need to flip it on its head a little bit. With tools, we talk about workflows, right? With organizations and divisions and verticals, we talk about processes because they're goal orientated. Usually tools are task orientated, i.e. I can do step 1 to 8 to get you here. It's part of a larger process, but it isn't the whole process. Wouldn't it be great if a software kind of went from all the way from bid through to execution? I think you mentioned as well, Jordan, there's layers to this. So don't feel like I'm bamboozling you. I'm just trying to get my head straight as well. I've only had a couple of hours sleep, Jordan, too. But my view is that we are struggling to manage workflows in a contractual environment, given whatever contract it is. NEC has a great mechanism because it works like a workflow. It thinks like a workflow. It has stages. It has sections that can be mechanized and automated. So that's what I think the attraction is of NEC. And unfortunately, in Australia, we do not adopt the NEC approach. And I think it's a real disappointment that we do not do that. But I don't have the power to change that. Hopefully I can influence my small world. But what I wanted to get to point is when we talk about machine learning, is there an advantage to machines, not necessarily talking about workflows, but talking about organizational design straight off the bat? First question. Or maybe we go to you, Jordan, first.
You spun me with the last part of your question there. Organizational design, from that, we're talking about AWP and contract.
Yeah, so you want to break it out?
Yeah, maybe unpack that a little bit. But
it's a little, I'll unpack. So what I mean is if we said we were on an NEC contract, we understood the scope of the work before it started, could we then plug in all these predetermined fields? And you said it as well, Jeff, the types of project that we're going to deliver, and say, what would be the best organization from an efficiency perspective to deliver this project? And then, you know, it does this little pump, 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 and pumps out a little piece of paper or digital piece that says, this is the best way to organize the project so that you have the most efficiency and you're maximizing cross collaboration and cross functioning. Gotcha. No, I totally get where you're coming on. Now I see the relevancy to the whole AWP perspective situation. So it comes from, you know, all the way back to a design, to a scope of work, to with that scope of work, you need to break that out into a package of work, right? And so typically a lot of those packages are offered out to tender for contracts that go through the NEC project, right? So with that scope of work, there's not only consultants and engineers and the actual contractors that are involved in that. And to speak a little specifically about InEight and back to the AWP, this goes back to my field engineering days when we used to literally build the work package that needed to break down the larger scope into this smaller scope that you're going to give the field to actually go build. But the ability to break down a budget item from a model perspective, from a document perspective, from the cost perspective, all into this manageable package that how the work's going to actually be built into the field, right? So organizationally, I think that's what you mean by this, breaking it down into who's going to build it, who's going to be the stakeholders involved, what's going to be the material going to be related to it, who's going to be the labor, who's going to be the material, our equipment, that's all going to go into building this scope of work, right? And then there comes in the wrinkles, right? Then something changes in the middle of it. How are you going to deal with a change related to that package that
the contractor has subcontracted out, that there's a change that involves an engineer, and there's all these stakeholders involved. And how does that data really flow and actually manage a problem like that? So, and I was a little all over the place, but you kind of took me that way towards the end there with that organization comment. But it does really go back to that AWP, the ability to truly break down a scope of work that, when you do that, involves not only the various stakeholders, but all the elements and components that actually go into physically executing that package, right? And then managing the change when those changes do come up and actually happen.
Just before you go on, Val, I'm going to give a bit of a shout out to one of your Australian colleagues, because actually, you said about the Australians not using NEC. When we first looked at we were looking at processes that we could use in the UK to show the flexibility of the InEight platform. And actually, the original set of early warning processes and comp event processes came from an Australian contract that InEight hold. So it's actually an Australian organization that we originally built these for about 3 years ago. And what we did is, when we looked at them at the beginning of the beginning of last year now, we're in a new year. The only thing we did was we took those same processes and reviewed them against the fact that in that intervening period, InEight had created sort of, well over 300 odd internal integrations between the different capabilities of the platform, which meant that previously on the original version of those processes in use in Australia, there was still some manual interactions. And we were actually able to change that so that in the new version that we demonstrated at Project Knowles Expo, those interactions were pretty much all automated. So I have to, as I said, it pains me as an Englishman to give any credit to the Australians, but on that one I do have to.
Well, look, if it is Australia, I probably know who it is. It's probably someone like Cam Mills.
Do you know what? I would be, yes. Cam actually was at the thing, and he was the first one who also, so when the penny dropped with him, which was, hang on a minute, this isn't just NEC, this is pretty much any pan capability process, and it was right. It's actually, and they won't mind me saying it because they've talked about it openly, it's actually Sydney Water. Who have appeared on the NEC website themselves as a case study for the use of NEC in Australia. So yeah, that's where we originally got the process set from in terms of the InEight implementation there.
There you go, Australia. Yeah, Jordan, jump in.
I was just say one last kind of point to kind of wrap up that concept that Jeff said of how do we go from learning that there was a process to where we are today. And I think not even talking about InEight and our methodology and how we've grown from a company but it really goes to where the industry is and where they are is you have things you need to manage. So you go and get all the right tools for them, right? So it used to be Word and Excel and emails and all these things. And then it's now a platform ecosystem. So what InEight did and what the industry is doing is we need to go get all the best in class of the solutions to manage these various processes. So think about your budgets, your contracts, your documents, your change management processes, your estimation processes that you used to have to go all the way back to the estimate phase to estimate a change, for example. So, and then you connect them together. So that was kind of the phase up. We realized a process a couple of years ago. We did it through InEight's journey or the world's journey. They're starting to integrate these and eliminate data silos together. And then we talked a lot about we spent probably 20 minutes talking about AI as the third component of that in development and InEight's methodology, but where the industry is really going as well as you have all the right tools, you've connected them together. Now you have all the data in a data warehouse, common data environment. What do you do with it? You learn from it, you leverage that. You have your KPIs and analytics and data learning to really learn from that. So there's really 3 key steps and components. And I think the industry is still very far behind. And that's why I think that just one shout out again to InEight that we are ahead in the journey in the industry with that, because we're now into that third tier there with a process like NEC to really be able to go and have the right tools to deal with it. They're all connected in flow
Yeah.
data, connect stakeholders and collaboration together, and then we learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, from a contract perspective, the best approach for integration would be within NEC because it is so structured and complementary. I wonder though, if with regards to commercial, do commercial really want to be that closely managed? What I mean by it is, in the past, commercial people, and I know a lot of commercial people, so I'm not digging at the profession, or maybe I am. Screw it. They do like to be a little bit isolated for various reasons, obviously. In the past, there was always a thing called a commercial refresh on various projects that I was involved in. What that really meant was there was a stalemate between the client and the contractor, and they didn't know what to do, and we had to do something different. There was always a special little room for them. And if you were smart enough, you were in that room helping them, or dumb enough, perhaps. And so I think maybe with commercial adoption, so from thinking from an NEC perspective, if they want to adopt this is actually a transparent way of dealing with NEC. But have you come up with any resistance from a commercial perspective? Say, hey, is there a way to tailor this, or do we get a separate breakout room, or because we don't want to be really integrated with everybody else because we're special? How do you deal with that kind of that play?
We haven't. I mean, we have to be clear. InEight is relatively new to the UK and EMEA, and when we showed these processes, it was only November of last year, and what the cycles are in our industry. But the fact is that because of the flexibility that there is, you can implement those breakpoints. Because of the way in which the security models work within InEight, you can have those breakpoints as well in terms of what people can see. But the fact is that almost any objection is relatively simply overcome. The fact is that when you look at, and I referred to it in the presentation I did back at PC UK, at what I call the bow wave of incoming EWNs. At the moment, when people look at this list of early warning notices, it's almost meaningless. Yes, it's got costs and things associated with it, but without being able to tie that all the way through, it's impossible for a project manager or a project director or a contract manager to know what it potentially means. And that's the trick here, is turning a piece, lots of connected data into information that means something so that people can make business decisions. And most commercial managers will quite happily sit on that collaboration journey if they know that means that they can make better decisions with better information. So the fact is that doing it this way enables you, one of the first things we showed was having that list of EWNs, having that list of potential costs coming in, meant that even at the EWN register stage, you could already, as a project manager, think, hang on a minute, I'm in danger of blowing my contingency budget here. And if I'm already in danger of blowing my contingency budget, I need to be telling my project director or whoever there might be a potential draw on a management reserve. And that comes nice and early, and people can think about it, and it goes all the way through the process. And it doesn't stop the commercial people actually having the conversation that says, look, you said it was going to cost us 100,000, but we'd like you to pay you 80,000, whatever it is. Those sort of conversations, they will still happen. But the point is that because you've got the visibility, you can plan for that early. So as an example, if you think you're going to break your contingency budget, you can make early decisions to say, okay, I can't affect that. What can I affect? What levers do I have to bring myself back on time and on budget? So I might look at another piece of scope and think, actually, can I tweak that scope to give me the necessary budget and time to fix this issue that I've had this nice early warning of? And that's the whole point of the early warning process, is to give you that capability to make those decisions early with the best possible data.
I guess want to add that I'm like literally thinking of our process flow now of Jeff thinking through it and talking through it. But it was really funny because we had a line, because you talked about the challenges of the owners and the contractors and all that. And there was a line and it had the owner up here and the contractor down there. And someone looked at us and goes, wait, I thought the whole point of this was to get the people like together. Why is there a separating line in the middle? And I was like turning my head sideways. I'm like, well, that brings a good point. And I was like, that's the industry problem, because the line on top is they're using some software and the line on bottom, they're using some other software. And how do we get together, and bring collaboration together? And that's what a common platform of bringing common stakeholders together is the whole purpose, right?
Yeah. And it's a common challenge. I mean, the clients always love missionary position. They always do. And, it's very difficult to get out of that. So we need different positions in the industry. Hey, listen, don't take this down the wrong road. This is an open forum here. But you know what I mean? Is it, they're always on top of the situation, but arguably most of the time, the client is the least informed to make a decision. They need the contractor to provide a bottom-up perspective to help that commercial resolution. And look, if there is a common platform, that's what we're looking for. And I think what you said is pretty on point. So we deal with the kind of behaviors piece then I guess, what is the machine learning really doing for us? If we're training the machine, you said there was a bit of a ML AI thing happening. It's a big buzz in the market at the moment. I mean, I dread to hear another Chat GPT prompt, but what is it that is unique in the machine learning space? Is it something we talked about before, where we're moving away from lagging indicators? And Jeff, you mentioned it. I like the integration of risk. So is it predicting some challenges that we're going to have or face, or is it about contingency burnout? And guys, if you keep doing this, you're going to run out of money pretty soon. Where is it really adding value from a machine learning perspective?
So
who wants to go?
From a machine learning perspective, there's two real areas. The first is the one we've talked about already, which is, the machine will learn what risks occur on projects. And it can proactively suggest to you that the project that you are currently, scheduling and scoping might have these risks. And that feeds directly into the NEC requirement that at the beginning of the contract, the contractor and the supplier and the client share their first set of risk registers. Mm-hmm. And if the machine has helped you create that risk register based on previous projects that you've done on both sides, you can actually start to plan more effectively, because you've got that history of knowledge. Machines are good at picking that up, humans not so. But the other part to it is, and one of the things that InEight has, is because using the collaborative system, we can track an initial estimate right the way through the iterations, right the way through the bidding and the contracting and the actual final contract, and then the actuals at the end of it. Because that data is all linked, what it means is that the next time you estimate a project, estimate can show you, when you're estimating it, hang on, you're estimating this, I don't know, pipe work. The last time you estimated this pipe work, or the last 20 times you estimated this pipe work, this is what you thought it would be. This is what your final estimate was, and this is what it actually was. So again, you get that positive feedback loop, that continual improvement that makes things better and better and finer and finer. And that's just a capability that exists on the platform today.
Is that not very similar to earn value?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Is that similar to earn value in sense of, here is the performance of the past actualized, you have a record of that. Is it this just kind of prompting? There's a prompting part to this that reminds you that it's this is the past performance and this is what it should be?
I can take that, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think very similarly. I mean, it's the buzzword of the term is benchmarking. Although from in the actual execution phase, the earned value, how many man hours per unit that's being taken, that you're analyzed, right? What are you actually earning versus burning? And when you do that analyzation, though, it's just the end result of that either it's unit cost or a production rate or something that's analyzed when you're analyzing earned value management, just at the end point in time that's being sent back. That when you're actually, if you think about it, when you estimate pipe, he used the pipe example, how many meters of pipe per man hour are you installing is a value that you use to estimate at, right? But then when you're actually tracking in the field and you're tracking labor hours in the field and you're pumping in quantities, maybe they're coming from contractors, maybe. And then when you look at that on a line item and an earned value management analysis perspective, you say, okay, we've been on this, running this percent productivity, installing this amount currently. And then you analyze, you can forecast, and then you get into the job and then send that back to the estimate and say, okay, well, we've been setting our field up for success continuously, or most less common, we can be, and you need to be aggressive and competitive in the bidding environment today, that you may see that you're continually overbidding on items, and you can see that your team's cranking out work and they're performing. Again, that's less common, but then you can be more aggressive and bring that down and be more competitive in the bidding environment.
Yeah, there's a challenge with that. I think we like to embed, a little bit of float here, a little bit of padding, we call it, into the program. We don't like people to know about that, by the way, Jordan. It's a PM code of conduct. I don't know what it is, but it's something we do on the contractor side, because we know the client is, as I said, is in the missionary style. And obviously, if we don't have enough contingency, it's not always declared. It becomes a bit of a challenge to manage. But look, I've got another question, and then I'll hand off to Dale. But we've got this real challenge at the moment with scarcity, and maybe this is what's driving a lot of the machine learning, AI, software dependence, the technology openness, and obviously COVID helped accelerate that. We were able to break free from the mandates of physical presenteeism. We're able to try and use technology to be a little bit more creative in the way we deliver projects, which is great. It's opened up borders, but we still have a scarcity of skilled resources. When we implement software like this and we're saying maximize efficiency, with my client hat on, does that mean I can reduce the number of roles I have within the organization? If you say that this is super efficient, then I don't need 5 risk people, I need 2. Is there a benefit there?
Kind of. So what you will tend to find is that organizations will fill the roles that need doing. And consequently, if they are an inefficient organization, they will overfill those roles compared to an efficient organization. The fact is that using a collaborative platform where data is collected by people doing their day job, which is the ideal point, the data is captured at the point it's created, then that makes you a more efficient organization. And therefore, the people that are doing that job, the data they are creating is being used efficiently. So you're not then having to employ additional people because you are making your other people inefficient by saying, once you've done this, you have to take this data, you have to copy it over into this spreadsheet, you have to do all these manipulations on it, and then you have to send it off to these other people. All that wasted work is man hours, and man hours need people.
It literally goes back to thinking about the Lean Six Sigma when we talked about lean, and which was originally in manufacturing, right? And then whenever that term got introduced to construction, I remember the first time I was pitching the new business excellence model, and I said that word, and this guy was like, "What are you talking about? You are crazy." And now it's such a thing, right? I mean, it literally is the same thing as where lean originated in manufacturing, of an assembly line, of the ability to cut out waste. And sometimes, the world's trying to create more jobs for people. So it's kind of but also trying to make more money at the same time, right? You need to lean down and be more efficient, but eliminating that waste, even when it is physically bodies, because of technology has taken over it, but it does make people operate more lean. And when there is scarcity in the workspace for talented professionals to operate in those spaces when technology can take over and reduce the need for that, which is only maximizes the end goal of profit, right? So.
Yeah, and I think I'll be doing a disservice to the listeners if I didn't talk about the risk of machine learning. One of the clearest kind of conversations when anything new comes in, there are the early adopters, but then there's a whole bunch of people who go, well, am I going to lose my job?
Yep.
And I'll say, yeah, absolutely. If you don't enhance your role, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be stuck in a space that you don't like. It'll be very uncomfortable for you. And so I guess from your perspective, how is it empowering, enabling, enhancing roles within organizations?
The better data allows people to make better decisions. And the people that can take advantage of the better data will make headway in any organization, whether it's construction, IT, retail, it doesn't matter. If you can take a set of data and make a reasonable deduction from it and make good decisions from it, you will do well. And if you are a person whose job relies on just being able to manipulate a spreadsheet so that it can go from one system to another, perhaps that's not the best use of anybody's time, least of all your own. And you might be better learning to do something other than that. And that might be actually learning how to make the systems operate in a way that you don't need the spreadsheet to go between them.
Yep.
I think just to add, just one comment to add too, and it's been such a direct observation late, and I'm more pre-sales aspect, but still observe and involved in a lot of the post-sales implementation aspect. But when companies have, even in the pre-sales, evaluated their software and they're coming to InEight and we're going through a full evaluation, and they realize when they put these teams together and they all of a sudden realize, oh my God, there's so many inefficiencies that if adopted and operated in our organization, and when we do process improvement and analysis, they realize we really can eliminate or reshift and refocus and maximize the organization's allocation of resources in the appropriate area to maximize profit. And it's crazy. It was really crazy and observative of me to see that just a software evaluation made the business understand and really depict and data realize really resource allocation and inefficiencies that are in the organization. And you're seeing a lot of organizations lean down because of it, or at least reshift and maximize resources in the area. And it's coming from data and technology, right? And it's just an interesting organizational shift that happened as a result of technology implementation and evaluation. And I just thought it was kind of mind blowing.
And just to add to that, we're not different to any other organized or industry or organization. There has been all sorts of things about, tills or supermarkets where customers operate their own till. They don't need somebody to sit there and physically scan things. Customers do it for themselves. And there's a lot of stuff about, well, what will all the shop workers do? But the fact is even today, there are now shops where the customer doesn't even have to swipe a barcode. They walk in, they pick up their stuff, and they walk out. And because the IT knows who they are and what they've picked up and how many of them, it just sends them a bill thereafter. So the fact is, this stuff is going to happen. And we all owe it to ourselves to make sure that we are moving forward with it, because change is inevitable. And it's an awful cliche, but it's that for a reason. It is inevitable. You have to decide how you're going to cope with it.
Yeah, we don't have any of those shops in Australia, Jeff. That's called shoplifting for anyone who's listening. There are laws against it, so please, we are not recommending that. Jeff's not saying that in Australia, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's a very exciting kind of idea that self-serve becomes almost completely autonomous and you can just carry on with your day. But look, I think I had one more, which is really around some of the changes in adoption. Because again, how do you get the word out there that these kinds of software and approaches and technologies out there? and people are opening up their platforms and providing training academies, and they're providing ways of accessing learning. Because again, we talked about, your roles becoming not redundant, but effectively being very uncomfortable if you don't move with the times. And I get asked a lot, what can I do? How do I get on this? How do I improve? Because the words machine learning and AI, whilst we're probably pretty comfortable now, and maybe most of the mainstream understand it from a higher level, I think there is a lot of apprehension to how do you get started in that space, and is it important to me, and what areas do I learn? Because it's quite a broad spectrum. Any recommendations for the people listening?
I would say I immediately come to a thought when I was in the role of a business excellence manager, as we were rolling out new technology, and we started to realize that some of the roles and the people were, people still feeling more comfortable, but we tried to open it up and really promote in the organization. We created this thing called like the idea center. So we were trying to get even people on the lowest level in the field that are actually holding the tools, that are actually driving the process on the lowest level, even labor down, is that that they communicate their ideas and they're part of the solutions, right? So when you're going through a software implementation or evaluation, and it's got to be controlled at the right level, right? There's got to be the right C-level and the right actual users that actually get to give their input. But finding an environment and an organization to facilitate the ideas and learning from the users, not only for management, is just so important. And so even in InEight, like a software company, have to understand how to co-in, and it even goes into the change management right in the future part of that process. But to really get everyone's thoughts really do matter and empower people in an organization is just so, I can't explain how powerful it is, because when somebody finally does make a decision and they're sold on the software, whether it was the people or the management, from like a dictatorship driving down, you still got to implement it, and you still got to have success in the future, right? So engaging the right stakeholders and the people, and catching their attention, but catching their attention by empowering them and making them feel part of the solution is where I have felt, it's not just us going to management and selling a software. It's really getting down to that field, the people who are actually making a difference and building the work, and empowering them, and that just grows. It's like going from the roots up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me jump in there, Jeff Jordan, because Val's, he's taken us into the gutter. So I'm going to try and lift us up from down under there on this episode. Just two quick ones from me, and they could be yes/no questions. Z clauses. Are Z clauses accommodated?
Yes.
How though? Because they are bespoke clauses that are written. How are they accommodated? Because they can have many various implications. So I feel like, or maybe you're telling me all of the various implications and settings are built into the software. Is that really the case? Because there's so much out there.
So there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. So the fact is that the NEC processes, as I said before, we chose those to demonstrate the power of the platform. When we built those NEC processes, the absolute key thing for us was that it had to be done in a way that we could honestly, and we were able to do it. We didn't have to go back to development for one single piece of code. There was no add-on, there was no customization. Everything we did to deliver the processes that are there are pure configuration.
Oh, wow.
And what that means is that if you are an organization, one of the things we do when we implement our software is we ensure that we leave behind a group of people who are able to configure and operate the system. Teach a man to fish is our, the way in which we work. If you want to change something because you have a Z clause, that's not a problem. You just go into the software and you change it.
Cool. Awesome stuff.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
It's just part of the way in which we operate. We haven't hidden it behind, huge amounts of customizations or massive Python scripts or anything like that. It's just pure config.
Awesome, awesome. And accepted programs. Do you think we'll see more accepted programs as a result of having these integrated processes with software?
Yes, but you can almost hear the reluctance in my voice. The fact is, yes, it's a key part of NEC, but it has its own set of issues, and part of that is because at what point do you move from being the program that everybody is using day in, day out, to the point at which you agree that change and you make that, you have the new accepted program, especially on a massive project where you've potentially got a dozen suppliers.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, in terms of the supplier accepted program, but I think it is one of the headaches that we are going to have to look at as an industry, which is how, as a set of planners and project managers, are you going to cope with the fact that you still have to manage something at the overall level, and it's not easy. And I don't think no software is going to wave a magic wand over that. So
do you think the role of a planner is going to change over the next few years with the more adoption of collaborative tool sets? Because we've already said on the pod so far, AI can already inform durations, risk, resource requirements, give some pretty good visualizations. What's the point? Like, what are they going to be doing?
Yeah, personally, I think it will, because I think actually what will happen is that the planner will almost move to accommodate that issue we've just spoken about, which is the fact that the trick isn't going to be the actual plan, as it were. It's going to be ensuring that there is a consistent view across an entire project or program or portfolio. Because everybody will have really good plans, but it's then how do you make sure that that is done consistently, so that when somebody is looking at the executive level, they are getting the right data to make the right decisions. And I think that's potentially how that role will transform.
Yeah, it's interesting one, the impact of AI technology, machine learning on our profession. And I for one think it's not necessarily about replacing people. I think it's replacing roles, and the roles will evolve, because let's face it, even if we replaced roles as they currently are today, that's a great thing, because we don't have enough skilled people to fill the roles for projects today. So it's not a bad thing, is my take on it. But two more, I guess, for Jordan, more technically. Will this also help solve the whole confusion between an earned value management baseline, a PMB, and the last accepted program? Because people get confused between the two, right? Because there's two different points of measure. Will it help simplify it?
Sorry, you broke up there a little bit.
Am I back with you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Back in Dubai. So PMB, EVM PMB, performance measurement baseline, NEC last accepted programs. There's always a debate over which one is the baseline, a contractual baseline versus a performance measurement baseline. Will this integration help solve the confusion between the two measures?
Jeff, is there a lifeline here, man?
I don't think it will solve it.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, it comes about from two different ways of doing fundamentally the same thing. I think it will make will make the differences starker, and it will make it easier to manage it, but I don't think it will solve it, no.
Fair enough. And I guess, Jordan, maybe one for you here. What's stopping others out there doing what you guys are doing?
Other software companies, you mean?
Yeah, well, whether it's software companies, whether it's in-house data analytics teams, anyone, AI, ChatGPT.
Sure. I really think it goes back when we do our competitive analysis today. It really goes back to that three-phased approach that I talked to, of having all the right solutions, connecting all those together. And even InEight has faced these challenges where we bought a couple solutions off the shelf, we've developed in-house, where all of a sudden you realize all these things need to connect and flow together. And one thing is on an AWS server and one thing's on an Azure server. And there's all these things, you're like, oh my God, how are we going to get all this together? And it takes some serious capital investment and time. And where I think InEight has the true and competitive advantage, really brought that together, is the true industry experts. And so what we've taken as a team, I'm part of our quality management and turnover a team, we broke down 18 core, what we call business processes of this group. And what it does is it really looks across, instead of thinking about all these solutions and technology and the platforms that you need to do this, is really focus on that business process and understand really the flow of that data, not having the right scheduling and estimating. And so you see too many of these point solutions out there with a lot of our competitor space. And I feel like we are way far advanced that, because of our industry experts really driving process. And when you drive process, you see the flow of that data, and you realize, all of a sudden you color code that process map with the modules, or I even think going back to, let's spray a current business's technology that they have, and then in a current state, and how do you get to that future state, right? And I think just InEight was ahead of the curve by our industry experience and really thinking business process that got us where we are today, and ahead of the market there. But yeah, certainly competitors are more point solutions based, and then realizing, gosh, we need to connect these, and they're in different, back end space, which I'm very lack of knowledge about, but it does make sense. And that's the challenge we see, right?
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Look, we're heading towards the end of the pod, and thank you for putting up with the Australian, South African. It's not an easy thing to do, particularly when you haven't had much sleep, Jordan. And yeah, Jeff, sorry for invading your country. Val and I, well, Val used to be here. I am still here. So, you have to put up with us a little bit longer. But before we let you go, we will hand you over to an Englishman, Mr. Martin Curriston, to take you through your paces through our pop quiz.
Hang on, you never mentioned that bit.
Wow. It's in the fine print.
It's in the fine print, as Val said. As Dale said, 5 quick fire questions all about yourself. So if you're both ready and willing, let's give it a go. In terms of order, let's go Jeff, then Jordan for each question. So okay, let's make a start. Number 1, what's your one piece of advice for people new to the IT profession? Jeff.
Experiment.
Jordan?
Experiment.
Open-mindedness. There's just one word, open-mindedness.
Number 2, biggest misconception about AI? Jeff.
That it'll solve human-based problems.
See, because he keeps going to get first, he gets to steal things they're my thoughts. Now I got to think about it. Yeah, I was going to say totally the human aspect. Don't forget about the human aspect of it. Machines can't train themselves. They need humans.
Okay, flip reverse for this one. Jordan first. Are good leaders born or made?
Are good leaders born or made? Can I say both? I'll say born. You're born ready. I come born ready.
And it's both from me.
Born.
Okay. Number 4, what would be your book recommendation to our listeners? And we'll reverse again. Jeff now.
Wow. Funny enough, I've not got it yet, and I'm trying to remember the title of it, but there's a new book coming out by Bent Fjoborg about why projects go wrong.
Okay.
And it reminds me of a book about 20 years ago that talked about why projects go wrong and massive IT project disasters. And it's that same thing. You can never learn enough about why things went wrong in the past.
Oh, definitely. Jordan?
I'd say the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey or something, I think.
Covey.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just not to elaborate it, but it's just that makes people you realize that there's some habits that can really maximize your efficiency in life. And me personally, being in a year-round sports all my life, got a little down in my exercise later, getting so busy and traveling and everything, bringing that back into my life, my brain is just back executing at a level that that I felt that it had lacked for a minute. So I think it's a good healthy book.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. And finally, if you had your time again, would you go straight into IT, civil engineering, project management, something completely different? Jeff?
I think I'd probably still, I'd have followed maybe not the exact same path, but it would still have been IT. I'm a bit of a geek, unashamedly. So yeah, it would have been IT.
Jordan?
Now, I'd say from my perspective, I finally found my niche in life in a role that I really love. And how is my success where it is today? And it goes back to having construction and the combination of IT experience to really be able to relate with our customers and deliver it at a different perspective. If you had strongly one or the other, not that one or the other aren't successful and can cope and compensate, but it just comes natural in a space that we're in. We're in the construction industry and we're in tech as well, right? So I think a good combination of both. So I don't think I would change anything other than be a millionaire and ride in yachts and drive planes around instead of
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
I think we're all with you there, Jordan. But you're in Dubai, so maybe you can find, a couple of million or a yacht on your journey there. But look, thanks for putting up with us. I know it's very, very late your side, Jordan, so we really do appreciate it. And Jeff, thank you as well. Before we let you go, any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with? We'll start with Jeff.
I think it's thanks for the opportunity. It's been really interesting. I've learned a huge amount over the last couple of years, working with InEight. One thing I'd say is, anybody out there who wants to know more, absolutely just get in touch via the podcast, via LinkedIn, however, just get in touch. I'm really interested to find out what more we can do. So that would be my only last message, as it were.
What a fantastic invitation to the public to help push the boundaries of software and our project processes. Jordan, how about you? Any final thoughts?
I would say if you want to go back to building forts with me like we were doing and correlate that to analyzing a business process flow map for things going on in your business and want to analyze, forget about even InEight as a platform, not only that we can solve those, but feel free to pick my brain and dissect any process. And sometimes talking with somebody in a mindset like that really does kind of open up your mind and like, oh my gosh, we could do this, we could do that, and help you drive change in your business for the people out there that are listening and want to be a change agent in their organization today.
Awesome stuff. I'm sure Val will take you up on the opportunity to build a fort with you, maybe a treehouse or two as well. Val, any final thoughts?
100%. Oh, I love that. Thanks, gents, for I guess being patient with me and my inappropriate analogies. But it was great to have you on board. I really enjoyed where we went with this, and hopefully we will have you back soon.
Yep, good. Thank you.
Awesome. It was a pleasure. Thank you all.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all ours. Look, folks, that is the end of the podcast. But remember, before you go, please do help us pay it forward by sharing a link to this episode on your favorite social media platform. A massive thank you once again to our guests, Jordan Cannon and Jeff Quantrill, and also a shout out to Nate St. John. And thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me, Val, and Martin, it's bye.